Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Austin Hamilton's head throbbed as he pulled into the driveway of his suburban home. 36 hours in the ER had left him bone-weary, but a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He had plans to surprise Jana for their upcoming anniversary. 5 years of marriage deserved something special. The house was quiet when he entered. Too quiet. Austin's brow furrowed as he heard Jana's voice drifting from the kitchen, punctuated by giggles. "Oh, Gregory, you're terrible," she said, her tone light and playful. "My work husband, indeed." Austin's fingers tightened on his briefcase. Gregory again. That name had been coming up more and more lately. Always with a laugh. Always with a story. Always with Jana's eyes sparkling just a little too brightly. He cleared his throat as he rounded the corner. Jana's head snapped up. Phone clutched to her ear. "Oh, Austin, you're home," she said, her voice an octave too high. "I've got to go," she added quickly into the phone before ending the call. Austin watched her face carefully. A flicker of something passed across it before settling into a neutral expression. "How was your shift?" Jana asked, busying herself with straightening some papers on the counter. Austin shrugged, dropping his briefcase on a chair. "Long. Challenging. Had a guy come in with a nail gun accident, nearly lost his hand." He waited for Jana to react, to ask for more details like she usually did. Instead, she just nodded, her eyes distant. "Hey," Austin said, moving closer. "I was thinking about our anniversary next month. What do you say we do something special?" Jana's eyes widened slightly before she forced a smile. "Oh, right. Sure. We can figure something out." Austin frowned. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. Where was the excitement? The suggestions? The teasing hints about gifts? "Everything okay?" he asked, studying her face. Jana nodded quickly. "Of course, just work stuff on my mind. You know how it gets." Austin did know. But something about this felt different. Wrong. He pushed the feeling aside, chalking it up to exhaustion. "Well, I'm beat. Think I'll grab a shower and hit the sack," he said, heading for the stairs. "Okay," Jana replied, already turning back to her phone. "Sleep well." As Austin climbed the stairs, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. Something was off with Jana. He just couldn't put his finger on what. The next few weeks did nothing to ease Austin's concerns. If anything, they grew. Jana was spending more and more time at work, often coming home late with vague explanations about client meetings or project deadlines. And then there was the cologne. Austin first noticed it one night when Jana stumbled in well past midnight. It wasn't his. It wasn't anything she bought him. It was different. Spicy. Masculine. When he asked about it the next morning, Jana laughed it off. "Oh, that must have been from hugging goodbye after drinks with the team. You know how those finance guys like to drench themselves in the stuff." Austin nodded, but the explanation sat uneasily in his stomach. Work became a welcome distraction. The ER was as chaotic as ever, a constant stream of life and death decisions that left little room for personal worries. Austin threw himself into his cases, earning admiring glances from the nurses and respect from his fellow doctors. It was during one particularly grueling shift that things came to a head. A multi-car pileup on the highway had left the ER overwhelmed. Austin barked orders, his mind racing as he triaged patients and delegated tasks. "We've got a male mid-30s, severe head trauma and internal bleeding," a paramedic called out as they rushed in another gurney. Austin's hands were already slick with blood from the previous patient. He glanced at the monitors, made a split-second decision or two. "Now," he shouted, already moving to the next incoming casualty. Hours blurred together. Austin moved from patient to patient, his focus laser-sharp. When it was finally over, he stood in the locker room. Hands braced against the sink, blood-stained scrubs, a testament to the battle he just fought. "Hell of a job out there," Hamilton said. Dr. Reeves, the chief of medicine, clapped Austin on the shoulder. "You saved a lot of lives today." Austin nodded, too exhausted for words. He changed quickly, wanting nothing more than to get home and collapse into bed. But as he pulled into the driveway, he saw Janice Kerr was gone. Again, he checked his watch. Where could she be at this hour? He was still awake when she finally came home, smelling of wine and that strong cologne. "Late night?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Jana jumped, clearly not expecting him to be up. "Oh yeah. We had a client emergency. Gregory and I had to stay late to sort it out." There it was again. "Gregory," Austin's jaw clenched. "Jana," he said slowly, "I think we need to talk about Gregory." Jana's eyes narrowed. "What about him? Don't you think you've been spending a lot of time with him lately? This work-husband thing. It's starting to feel a little too real." Jana's laugh was sharp, brittle. "You're being paranoid, Austin. Gregory and I are just friends. It's not like we're having an affair or something." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Austin searched Jana's face, looking for something. He wasn't sure what. Guilt, defiance. He found nothing but cool detachment. "Right," he said finally, turning away. "Of course not." As he climbed the stairs to their bedroom, leaving Jana in the living room, Austin couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. The uneasy feeling in his gut had bloomed into full-blown dread. Their anniversary was approaching fast. Austin had made reservations at Jana's favorite restaurant, a surprise he'd been planning for weeks. But now, as he lay in bed listening to Jana move around downstairs, he wondered if there would be anything left to celebrate. The night of their anniversary arrived, crisp and clear. Austin left work early. A spring in his step, despite the gnawing worry in his gut. He'd push aside his concerns for one night. Focus on rekindling the spark that had brought them together in the first place. He straightened his tie as he approached the restaurant, a small box burning a hole in his pocket. The gift inside, a delicate necklace Jana had admired months ago, suddenly felt like a lead weight. Austin's steps faltered as he neared the window. There, at a table for two, sat Jana. But she wasn't alone. Across from her, leaning in close, was a man Austin didn't recognize. Their hands were entwined on the table, heads bent together in intimate conversation. Austin's vision tunneled. The world around him faded to a dull roar as he watched his wife laugh at something the man Gregory had said. She reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture Austin knew all too well. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, frozen in place as his world crumbled around him. Then, almost of its own accord, his body began to move, one foot in front of the other, until he was pushing open the restaurant door. Jana's face drained of color as she spotted him. "Austin, what are you doing here?" The guilt in her eyes told Austin everything he needed to know. Gregory, for his part, didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I could ask you the same thing, Austin," replied Gregory, his voice cold and steady. Austin was surprised at how calm he felt. The storm of emotions he'd expected was nowhere to be found. In its place was a steely resolve. "I came to surprise my wife on our anniversary, but it seems I'm the one getting the surprise." Gregory stood, his posture confrontational. "Look, man, why don't you just leave? Jana and I were having a nice evening." Austin's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. 5 years of marriage, countless night shifts, shared dreams and promises, all of it crystallized in this moment. He looked at Jana, saw the fear and guilt warring in her eyes. Then he looked at Gregory, all arrogance and entitlement. "I think you're the one who needs to leave, Gregory," Austin said, his voice low and controlled. "This is between my wife and me." As Gregory opened his mouth to argue, Austin held up a hand. "Unless, of course, you'd like me to call your wife and invite her to join us. I'm sure she'd be interested to know how you spend your evenings." The color drained from Gregory's face. He glanced at Jana, who was staring at the tablecloth, then back at Austin. Without another word, He grabbed his jacket and left. Austin took the now vacant seat across from Jana. She looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "Austin, I can explain." "Don't." He cut her off. "Just don't." He'd reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box, placing it on the table between them. Jana's eyes widened as she recognized it. "Happy anniversary," Austin said, his voice devoid of emotion. Then he stood, straightened his tie, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. As he stepped into the cool night air, Austin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with lawyers and paperwork and painful conversations. But for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. Austin Hamilton got into his car and drove away, leaving behind the shattered remains of his marriage and the woman he thought he knew. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight he would sleep soundly, secure in the knowledge that he had finally seen the truth. And in that truth, painful as it was, he found an odd sort of freedom. Austin Hamilton woke the next morning, his mind clear despite the events of the previous night. The bed beside him was empty, Jana having chosen to sleep in the guest room. He dressed methodically, his movements precise and controlled. Downstairs, he found Jana sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She looked up as he entered, a flicker of hope crossing her face. "Austin." He held up a hand, cutting her off. "I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Jana's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please, Austin," she begged, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. We can work through this." Austin regarded her coolly, unmoved by her tears. "You've made your choice, Jana. Now you have to live with it." He turned away, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Behind him, Jana's sobs grew louder, more desperate, but Austin felt nothing. The love he'd once held for her had calcified into something hard and unyielding. "I'll be staying at a hotel for the time being," he said, not bothering to look at her. "My lawyer will be in touch," he added as he left the house, briefcase in hand. Austin allowed himself a small smile. Jana didn't know it yet, but he'd been prepared for this eventuality. Last night, after leaving the restaurant, he'd made a call to Walter Daniel, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Walter's reputation preceded him. He was known for leaving scorched earth in his wake, ensuring his clients walked away with everything, while their soon-to-be ex-spouses were left with nothing but regrets. Austin's phone buzzed as he got into his car. A text from Walter. "Meeting set for 2 p.m. We'll nail the cheating individual to the wall." Austin's smile grew wider as he drove to the hospital. Today was shaping up to be a good day after all. At the hospital, Austin threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. The chaos of the ER was a welcome distraction from his personal life. He moved from patient to patient, his focus laser-sharp, his decisions quick and decisive. "Dr. Hamilton," a voice called out as he finished stitching up a nasty laceration. Austin looked up to see Dr. Reeves, the chief of medicine, beckoning him over. "Walk with me," Dr. Reeves said, leading Austin away from the bustle of the ER. They walked in silence for a moment before Dr. Reeves spoke again. "I'll cut to the chase, Hamilton. We're creating a new position, Chief of Emergency Medicine. I want you for the job." Austin blinked, momentarily taken aback. "I'm flattered, sir, but no buts." Dr. Reeves cut him off. "You're the best doctor in this place. That multi-car pile-up last week. You saved lives that night, Hamilton. Lives that would have been lost under anyone else's watch." Austin considered the offer. Chief of Emergency Medicine. It was a prestigious position, one that would come with more responsibility, more resources, more influence. And right now, influence was exactly what he needed. "When do I start?" Austin asked, his decision made. Dr. Reeves clapped him on the shoulder, grinning. "That's what I like to hear. We'll make the announcement next week. In the meantime, keep this under wraps." "All right." Austin nodded, already thinking of how this new position would play into his divorce strategy. More money, more prestige. It all worked in his favor. As he headed back to the ER, Austin's phone buzzed again. Another text from Walter. Meeting moved to 4 p.m., bringing financial advisor. Time to protect your assets. Austin smiled. Everything was falling into place. At precisely 4 p.m., Austin walked into Walter Daniels' office. The lawyer was a small, weasel-faced man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He grinned as Austin entered, revealing a mouthful of 2 white teeth. "Dr. Hamilton," Walter said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Austin took a seat, nodding to the other man in the room. Presumably the financial advisor Walter had mentioned. Now, Walter began, leaning forward. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Austin laid out the details of his marriage, Jana's infidelity, and his suspicions about their finances. Walter listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When Austin finished, Walter's grin had grown predatory. "Oh, this is good," he said, rubbing his hands together. "We're going to handle her, Dr. Hamilton. By the time we're done, she'll be lucky if she has anything left." The financial advisor cleared his throat. "If I may," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "I've taken the liberty of reviewing your finances, Dr. Hamilton. There are several steps we can take immediately to protect your assets." Austin leaned forward, all ears. For the next 2 hours, they devised a strategy that would leave Jana with nothing. By the time Austin left Walter's office, he felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Jana had made her bed with Gregory. Now she'd have to lie in it, alone and without resources. Over the next few weeks, Austin settled into his new routine. Days at the hospital, nights poring over financial documents and legal strategies. He threw himself into his new role as chief of emergency medicine, implementing new protocols and pushing his team to excel. It was during one of these late nights at the hospital that he overheard 2 nurses whispering in the break room. "Did you hear about Dr. Hamilton?" One said, her voice low. "I heard his wife's been spreading rumors about him, saying he's unstable, unfit for his position." Austin froze, his hand on the door handle. "No way." The other nurse replied, "Dr. Hamilton. He's the most level-headed person in this place." "That's what I thought." The first nurse said, "But apparently his wife and some guy named Gregory have been telling anyone who will listen that he's on the verge of a breakdown." Austin's jaw clenched. So Jana and Gregory thought they could play dirty. They had no idea who they were dealing with. He pushed open the door, startling the nurses. "Evening, ladies," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Busy night." The nurses exchanged guilty looks before mumbling excuses and hurrying out of the break room. Austin watched them go, his mind already formulating a plan. The next day, he called a staff meeting. Every doctor, nurse, and orderly packed into the conference room, curious about the sudden assembly. Austin stood at the front, his posture relaxed, his expression open. "I'm sure some of you have heard rumors about my personal life," he began. "I wanted to address them directly." He paused, looking around the room. Every eye was on him. "Yes, my wife and I are divorcing." He continued, "It's an unfortunate situation, but one that will not affect my work or my commitment to this hospital. Any rumors you may have heard about my stability or fitness for this position are just that. Rumors spread by individuals who are, frankly, desperate and vindictive." He smiled, spreading his hands. "My door is always open if anyone has concerns, but I think my work speaks for itself. Now let's get back to saving lives, shall we?" As the room emptied, Austin caught snippets of conversation. "Can you believe his wife would do that? What a person. Dr. Hamilton's the best thing that's happened to this ER in years." Austin allowed himself a small smile. Jana and Gregory's plan had backfired spectacularly. His position was more secure than ever. That evening, as Austin reviewed the day's cases, his phone buzzed with a notification from his banking app. He frowned, opening it to find a large withdrawal from their joint account. For a moment, anger flared in his chest. Then, just as quickly, it subsided, replaced by a cold, calculating calm. He picked up his phone, dialing Walter's number. "Jan has been siphoning money from our joint account," he said. When Walter answered, "Want me to shut it down?" Walter asked, already sounding eager for a fight. "No," Austin replied, a plan forming in his mind. "Let her keep going. Document everything. We'll use it in court." He could almost hear Walter's grin through the phone. "Oh, you're good, Dr. Hamilton. You're very good." As he hung up, Austin leaned back in his chair, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. Jana thought she was being clever, but she was only digging herself a deeper hole. Let her take the money, he thought. Every dollar she stole was another nail in the coffin of her case. By the time they got to court, she wouldn't have a leg to stand on. Austin turned back to his work, feeling more in control than ever. Jana and Gregory had no idea what was coming for them, but they would. Soon enough, they would. Weeks turned into months, and the divorce proceedings dragged on. Austin watched with detached amusement as Jana grew increasingly desperate. She tried every trick in the book, crying, begging, threatening. Nothing worked. One evening, as Austin was leaving the hospital, he ran into Tom and Sarah, a couple he and Jana used to double date with. Their faces were tight with discomfort as they spotted him. "Austin," Tom said, nodding stiffly. "How are you?" Austin smiled, all warmth and charm. "I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you two?" Sarah shifted nervously. "We're fine." Austin, we wanted to talk to you about something Jana told us." Austin's smile didn't falter. "Oh, what did she say?" Tom cleared his throat. She said you were controlling, abusive, even. We didn't want to believe it. But you thought you should check just in case," Austin finished for him. He nodded, his expression understanding. "I appreciate your concern. Truly. But I think you know me better than that." He paused, letting his words sink in. Tom and Sarah exchanged glances. Jana's going through a difficult time. Austin continued, his voice soft with false sympathy. "I think she's having trouble accepting the consequences of her actions. It's easier to paint me as the villain than to face her own mistakes." Sarah's eyes widened. "Her actions? You mean?" Austin nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. I caught her with another man. On our anniversary, no less." Tom's face hardened. "That person," he muttered, then looked embarrassed. "Sorry," he needed to apologize. Austin said, patting Tom on the shoulder. "I understand. It's a shocking situation." As he walked away, leaving Tom and Sarah to digest this information, Austin allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Another battle won. Jana's attempts to turn their friends against him were backfiring spectacularly. Meanwhile, across town, Jana sat in a dingy bar, nursing her third vodka tonic. Across from her, Gregory shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Jana," he said, his voice low and urgent. "This is getting too messy. Maybe we should cool things off for a while." Jana's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "Cool things off? Are you kidding me?" Gregory held up his hands placatingly. "Look, I just think." "No," Jana cut him off. "Don't get to think. You don't get to walk away from this. Do you have any idea what I've lost because of you?" Gregory's face hardened. "Because of me? You made your own choices, Jana. Don't try to pin this all on me." Jana laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "My own choices. You pursued me. You told me I deserved better than Austin. You promised me the world, and now you want to cool things off." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "If you even think about leaving me, I'll tell your wife everything. Every dirty little detail. How's that for messy?" Gregory paled, his bravado evaporating. "You wouldn't." Jana's smile was all teeth. "Try me." As Gregory slumped into his feet, Jana felt a flicker of satisfaction. It was fleeting, quickly doused by the reality of her situation. She was losing everything: her marriage, her friends, her reputation. But damned if she let Gregory walk away in scath. Back at the hospital, Austin was in his element. He moved through the ER with purpose, barking orders, and making split-second decisions that saved lives. "Dr. Hamilton," a young resident called out, her voice tinged with awe. "That new triage protocol you implemented, it's incredible. We're seeing a 30% reduction in wait times." Austin nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "Good work, Dr. Chen. Keep monitoring the numbers. I want a full report by the end of the week." As he continued his rounds, Austin couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Despite the chaos in his personal life, his professional life was thriving. He was making a real difference here. Later that night, as he sat in his office reviewing patient files, Austin's phone buzzed with a text from Walter. "Good news. Judge Hawkins is presiding over your case. He's notoriously strict on cheaters. This is going to be tough." Austin leaned back in his chair, a feeling of satisfaction washing over him. Everything was falling into place. Jana thought she could destroy him, but she had no idea what was coming. He opened his laptop, pulling up his financial records. It was time to start liquidating assets, stocks, savings accounts, their shared vacation property in the Poconos. All of it needed to go. And the house. Austin smiled as he pulled up the real estate listings. Their beautiful suburban home, the one Jana had spent months decorating to perfection. He'd put it on the market tomorrow, without telling her a thing. As he worked late into the night, Austin felt a sense of grim determination. Jana had made her choice. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. The courthouse loomed before Jana, its imposing facade a stark reminder of the battle she was about to face. She clutched her handbag tightly, knuckles white with tension. Beside her, Gregory shifted nervously in his seat. "Ready?" Jana asked, her voice tight. Gregory nodded, not meeting her eyes. "Let's get this over with." As they climbed the steps, Jana allowed herself a moment of hope. They had gathered what they believed to be damning evidence against Austin. Surely, the judge would see through his act, recognize him for the controlling, abusive monster she'd painted him to be. Inside, the courtroom was a buzz of activity. Jana's eyes immediately found Austin, sitting calmly at the plaintiff's table. His posture was relaxed, his expression neutral. Beside him sat his attorney, Walter Daniel, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Jana's stomach churned. This wasn't going to be easy. As the proceedings began, Jana watched with growing horror as Walter systematically dismantled every claim she and Gregory had brought forward. For each accusation of abuse or control, Walter produced witnesses, colleagues, friends, even Jana's own family members, who testified to Austin's character and integrity. Then came the financial evidence. Walter presented meticulous records of Jana's withdrawals from their joint account, painting a picture of a woman preparing to flee with her lover, siphoning away shared assets. "Your Honor," Walter said, his voice smooth as oil, "it's clear that Mrs. Hamilton's claims are not only baseless but malicious. She has attempted to destroy my client's reputation and career, all while engaging in an extramarital affair and financial misconduct." Jana's lawyer, a less experienced alternative to Walter, looked overwhelmed. He fumbled through his notes, searching for a counterargument that never came. The final blow came when Walter produced a series of emails between Jana and Gregory, dating back months before the affair was discovered. Their contents were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Jana felt the blood drain from her face as the judge read through the emails, his expression growing increasingly stern. Beside her, Gregory had gone pale, his eyes darting towards the exit. As the judge delivered his ruling, Jana felt the world crumbling around her. The divorce was granted, with all of Austin's claims upheld. She was left with nothing but her personal belongings and a minimal alimony that would barely cover rent for a modest apartment. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Austin Hamilton," the judge declared. Mrs. Hamilton's claims of abuse and control are dismissed as unfounded and potentially defamatory. Given the evidence of her infidelity and financial misconduct, she will receive only the minimum alimony as required by law. Jana sat in stunned silence as the courtroom began to empty. She turned to Gregory, seeking comfort or reassurance, only to find him already halfway to the door. "Gregory," she called out, her voice breaking. He paused, looking back with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I'm sorry, Jana. I can't do this anymore. It's over." And with that, he was gone, leaving Jana alone in the rapidly emptying courtroom. She stumbled to her feet, making her way out to the courthouse steps on unsteady legs. The bright sunlight felt like a mockery of her dark mood. Jana stood there, blinking back tears, the full weight of her situation crashing down upon her. She had lost everything: her marriage, her home, her reputation. And now even Gregory had abandoned her. As reality sank in, Jana felt a wave of nausea wash over her. What am I going to do now? Where will I go? The future, once so bright with promise, now loomed before her, dark and uncertain. Meanwhile, Austin exited the courthouse, Walter at his side. The lawyer was grinning, clearly pleased with their victory. "Told you we'd handle her," Walter chuckled. "You should have seen her face when I brought out those emails. Priceless." Austin nodded, his expression neutral. "You did good work, Walter." "Thank you." As they reached the bottom of the steps, Austin glanced back. He saw Jana standing alone, looking lost and broken. For a brief moment, he felt a twinge of something. Not quite pity, not quite regret. Then it passed, replaced by a cool satisfaction. She had made her choice. Now she had to live with the consequences. A week after the divorce was finalized, Jana pulled up to what had once been her home. The sight that greeted her made her heart sink. The house was empty. Windows bare of curtains, and a large sold sign stood proudly on the manicured lawn. She sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what she was seeing. This can't be happening. Surely Austin wouldn't have the sound of another car pulling up broke her from her thoughts. Jana watched in the rearview mirror as Austin emerged from his vehicle, distraught, confident as he approached her car. Taking a deep breath, Jana stepped out to face him. "What's going on?" she demanded, gesturing wildly at the house. "Where's all our stuff? Why is there a sold sign?" Austin regarded her coolly, his expression impassive. "I sold the house, Jana. The new owners will be moving in next week." Jana felt as if she'd been slapped. You sold our house? Without telling me? You can't do this." "I can, and I did," Austin replied calmly. "The house was in my name. As per the judge's ruling, I was well within my rights to sell it." Jana's mind raced, panic setting in. "But where am I supposed to go? What about all my things?" "You have 1 week to remove your remaining possessions," Austin said, his tone businesslike. "Anything left after that will be considered abandoned property." The reality of her situation hit Jana like a freight train. She was homeless, jobless, nearly penniless, and now she had just days to figure out where to go and what to do with a lifetime's worth of belongings. "You can't do this," Jana screamed, her composure finally breaking. "Where am I supposed to go?" Austin's gaze was cold, devoid of any sympathy. "That's not my problem anymore, Jana. You made your bed with Gregory. Now you can lie in it." With those final, cutting words, Austin turned and walked away, leaving Jana standing in front of what was once their dream home. Now just another reminder of all she had lost. As Jana's sobs echoed behind him, Austin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was done. The last tie to his old life had been severed. He got into his car and drove away without a backward glance, leaving behind the shattered remains of his marriage and the woman who had betrayed him. Months passed and life moved on. Austin threw himself into his role as chief of emergency medicine with a passion that surprised even him. He implemented new protocols, pushing his team to greater heights of efficiency and care. Under his leadership, the ER became a model of excellence, drawing attention from medical professionals across the country. Austin found himself giving lectures, writing papers, his reputation growing by the day. But it wasn't all work. As the wounds of his failed marriage began to heal, Austin found himself opening up again. He made new friends, colleagues who shared his passion for medicine and his drive for excellence. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. One particularly busy day, Austin was making his rounds when a familiar face caught his eye. There, sitting in the waiting room, was Jana. She looked different. Her once perfectly styled hair was limp and unwashed, her designer clothes replaced by worn jeans and a faded t-shirt. Beside her sat Gregory, looking decidedly worse for wear. His face was pale, a sheen of sweat on his brow. He clutched his stomach, clearly in pain. Austin's first instinct was to turn away, to assign another doctor to the case, but his professional ethics won out. He was a doctor first, and personal feelings had no place in the ER. "Mr. Davidson," Austin called out, using Gregory's last name with cool professionalism. Gregory looked up, his eyes widening in recognition, and then fear as he saw Austin. Jana's head snapped up, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "Follow me, please," Austin said, leading them to an examination room. The examination was brief and clinical. Austin's questions were direct, his touch impersonal as he prodded Gregory's abdomen. Jana hovered nervously in the corner, her eyes darting between Austin and Gregory. "Looks like a case of acute appendicitis," Austin finally declared. "We'll need to prep you for surgery immediately." As Gregory was wheeled away to pre-op, Jana lingered in the room. Austin could feel her eyes on him as he made notes in Gregory's chart. "Austin," she began, her voice small and uncertain. He looked up, his expression neutral. "Yes, Mrs. Davidson. Is there something else you needed?" Jana flinched at the use of Gregory's surname. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Austin. I made a terrible mistake. Is there any chance we could?" "No, Jana." Austin cut her off, his voice firm but not unkind. "There isn't. What's done is done." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I wish you both well, but my life is better without you in it. Goodbye, Jana." With that, Austin turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jana standing there, the weight of her choices heavy on her shoulders. As he made his way back to his office, Austin felt a sense of closure wash over him. He had faced his past and come out stronger. The pain of betrayal, the bitterness of divorce, all of it had forged him into the man he was today. Austin sat down at his desk, already focusing on his next task. He had patients to see, lives to save, a department to run. The ghosts of his past had no place here. As he immersed himself in his work, Austin knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. He had emerged from the betrayal stronger, wiser, and more successful than ever before. His life was his own now, unburdened by the weight of a failed marriage or the pain of infidelity. The future stretched out before him, bright with possibility. And Austin Hamilton was ready to meet it head-on. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.